Tuesday last, after I ordered Honourable Bhagwan to withdraw from the chamber during the remainder of the day's sitting following his grossly disorderly conduct, pursuant to Standing Order 48 of the Standing Orders and Rules of the National Assembly 1995, Honourable Bhagwan uttered the following words to my address, I quote, "You are acting like an agent of the MSM, not as Speaker, an agent of the MSM. I consider the words uttered as being contemptuous and outrageous against the Chair, as well as casting aspersions on the impartiality of the Chair. Moreover, instead of leaving the chamber forthwith, as required, Honourable Bhagwan persisted in his grossly disorderly conduct. When I consequently suspended the sitting to allow the restoration of order in the chamber for the resumption of the business of the House, Honourable Bhagwan further uttered contemptuous and outrageous remarks to the address of other members of this august Assembly, as can be ascertained from the Hansard. I am reporting this incident to the Assembly because, in my opinion, this type of incident and grossly disorderly conduct, if left unchecked, would represent serious challenges to the authority of the Chair and of the decorum and dignity of the Assembly. In the circumstances, I leave it to the Assembly to proceed, as it may deem necessary, against the said member as it thinks fit in dealing with the above-mentioned breaches of order pursuant to Standing Order 49-8, which provides as follows, I quote, "Nothing in this order shall be deemed to prevent the Assembly from proceeding against any member for any breach of order not specified herein, or from proceeding in any other way it thinks fit in dealing with the breaches of order herein mentioned." I thank you for your attention.
Papers have been laid. Question.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
My question is addressed to the Honourable Minister of Gender Equality and Family Welfare. Whether in regard to baby S, who was in the care of Cap Malheureux Relay Shelter, also known as L'Oiseau du Paradis, she will state if she has ordered an inquiry into the circumstances in which the latter fell critically ill in the night of 21st October 2022, indicating A, if the relevant personnel of the shelter have been interdicted pending conclusion of the inquiry, and B, the qualifications of the 4 carers on duty on that night.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I thank the Honourable Leader of the Opposition to put this PNQ forward because it gives me the opportunity to shed some light on this case and hopefully prevent any speculative comments on the case. Mr. Speaker, sir, I am informed that on the 4th of August of this year, a case of child abandonment was referred by the medical social worker of Dr. A.G. Jitu Hospital to the Child Development Unit of my ministry. It was reported that one Mrs. M, who had given birth to a baby girl on the 27th of July this year, had left hospital without being discharged and had abandoned the baby thereat. Consequently, on the 9th of September this year, following an emergency protection order issued by the Children's Court, the baby was placed at L'Oiseau du Paradis Relay Centre, which is managed by the National Children's Council. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm further informed that on the 20th of October, the baby was brought to SSRN Hospital for medical treatment as she had a few bouts of diarrhea. According to the medical report from the hospital, the baby was tolerating her feeds and was well perfused. She had a sore throat and congested nose, but otherwise had no other reported issues. Consequently, the baby was prescribed medicine and allowed to return to the shelter. On the 21st of October, the baby was given anti-diarrhea milk and the prescribed medication. In the early hours of the morning, the child caregivers observed that the baby was weak and immediately conveyed her to SSRN Hospital, where she was admitted in the neonatal intensive care unit on the same day. According to the latest report from the hospital, the baby is still admitted in neonatal intensive care unit and is in a critical medical state. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to inform the House that in view of the seriousness of the case, a fact-finding committee has been put in place to assess whether all protocols have been observed. The committee comprises representatives of my ministry, the National Children's Council, the National Empowerment Foundation, the Ministry of Health and Wellness, the Police Department, and one independent member of the National Children's Council Board. The committee has already met on the 25th of October, and its assessment is still ongoing. Mr. Speaker, sir, with regard to Part A of the question, the conclusions of the fact-finding committee will determine any actions or sanctions as appropriate. As regards to Part B of the question, Mr. Speaker, sir, I am informed that the 4 child caregivers who were on duty on the 21st of October possess the requisite qualification as per the scheme of service, which is as follows: a certificate of primary education and at least reckon 2 years experience in working with children. All caregivers have been provided with an induction course as well as hands-on training and additional training on the following: the Children's Act of 2020 and Residential Care Institution for Children Regulation of 2022, the Child Protection and Child Abuse, on child care and identification of signs and symptoms of abuse, on management of children in care, handling of children, including handling of babies. Briefing session on the UNCRC, the United Nations Convention for the Right of the Child, its rules and regulations, roles and responsibilities, work ethics, team spirit, performance and attitude towards children, interpersonal relationship and child care and child welfare, briefing on bullying, non-discrimination, teen dating violence, coping strategies of different developmental stage for shelter residents, food handling, basic hygiene, first aid, only to mention a few. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to also inform the House that according to reports from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, the child was born premature with intrauterine growth restriction and was diagnosed with a congenital cardiac anomaly at birth. Moreover, the mother has a history of repeated termination of pregnancies. She had also been consuming alcohol, smoking cannabis, and injecting hard and illicit substances throughout her pregnancy, and had not followed antenatal care treatment at all. Following the case of child abandonment, my ministry is closely following the matter with the police. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is very unfortunate that this child is critically ill today due to the neglect of the mother during her pregnancy. Here we have a child born in extremely difficult circumstances. My ministry has been on the forefront to provide her with all necessary care and support, and I am personally following up on the matter with regular visits to the hospital.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleasantly surprised with the announcement that there will be a fact-finding committee. We have some trouble hearing the Minister. I don't know if she wishes to remove her mask as is allowed nowadays. Now, I'd like to ask the Honourable Minister, firstly, who may have, if you have been told, may have missed it, who is chairing this committee, please, and the terms of reference.
Mr. Speaker, sir, the fact-finding committee is being chaired by the Permanent Secretary of my ministry. Okay.
Continue.
I don't have the terms of reference in front of me, but I'll be very happy to table it to the House.
I ask the Honourable Minister whether the terms of reference will include staffing standards, human resource requirements, specialized training that is required, also adequate management and supervision, in particular, the need to standardize the standards in the public sector shelters with the private sector shelters. Will the terms of reference include all of these items?
Mr. Speaker, sir, the terms of reference of this fact-finding committee will be limited to ascertaining that all protocols pertaining to this particular case have been followed or not followed, and the recommendations will be based on the case for this case in particular.
I'd like to ask the Minister to consider enlarging you will understand from the questions that I'm going to put to you, that there's a need to enlarge the terms of reference to include everything. Now, this child, as we are told, fell ill on a night. She took her milk about at 7:30 p.m. and did not wake up at all during the night, and it was only in the morning that she was taken to the hospital. Now, can I ask the Honourable Minister whether she has made preliminary inquiries to find out what happened during that night, why, when she didn't wake up to take her milk after 3 hours, say, she wasn't woken up, and why alarm bells did not ring immediately to be taken to hospital, and secondly, whether there are protocols in place for night emergencies, and if so, would she table these protocols?
Mr. Speaker, sir, there are definitely very strict and well-established protocols for night rounds, and allow me to inform the House that according to Section 10(5)(b)(1) of Residential Care Institutions for Children Regulations of 2022, the ratio of caregivers is 1:5 to begin with. I will come to your question. The protocol for the night shift, which you've asked, is that one caregiver is always present in the baby section, and that every 2 hours rounds are carried out to make sure that babies are faring well. On the night of the 21st of October, Mr. Speaker, sir, there were 12 residents and 4 caregivers who were in attendance. As to what exactly happened and whether these protocols were respected or not, Mr. Speaker says that this is precisely the reason why the fact-finding committee has been established to make light on what happened exactly between those hours.
I understand that there are cameras at the shelter. I presume that the Minister has arranged for these cameras to be secured so that they can be used for the inquiry. Let me ask the Honourable Minister, therefore, my question was protocol for night emergencies. Do you have this protocol? Is it written? I presume it must be written somewhere. And would you like to share these protocols with this House?
The protocols are in place. They are not with me at the moment. I'll have to see whether they can be tabled to the House, but the protocols are in place.
Well, we hope. I don't see anything that would preclude you from sharing this. May I ask the Honourable Minister, I come back to this question. I understand that the child has meningitis. Now, everyone knows that meningitis, not being a doctor myself, has to be treated within hours. Otherwise, it's often too late. This is why the question of from 7:30 p.m. onwards, it took 12 hours for the child to be taken to hospital. This is why I'm coming back to this issue, which is an issue of life and death for this poor child. Why the child was not taken to hospital at night, as I presume is in your protocol. Why? Because a child is in a tragic situation at the moment.
I completely agree with the Leader of the Opposition that this is a very unfortunate case of a critically ill child. But myself, not being a medical doctor, I have been informed that the symptoms and diagnosis of meningitis in infants is often masked as what was diagnosed initially as bouts of gastroenteritis. It is only yesterday or very recently that the diagnosis for meningitis was established, and even that, the bacteria that will confirm this diagnosis has yet to be established.
Okay, so we'll wait to the fact-finding report to know why she wasn't taken immediately at night to the hospital when she didn't take her milk. I don't think the Minister addressed that part of my question. I'd like to ask the Honourable Minister this question. The baby was premature and had obvious medical conditions, which I've just stated. How is it that after 44 days, not even 40 days in hospital, this baby was removed from the hospital, taken to this care center where there is no medical practitioner, no nursing staff, and apparently the caregivers only have a CPE to account for themselves. Now, why, and I'll come afterwards to your own protocol for private sector, why was this child who has a medical condition taken to this type of shelter after only 40 days?
Mr. Speaker, sir, any child referred to the Child Development Unit of my ministry from the hospital is done so up by being medically discharged. So it is not as if the personnel of CDU has gone and plucked the child from the hospital and brought it to the Cap Malheureux Relay Center. I should also like to point out, Mr. Speaker, sir, that again, the personnel, the caregivers at any shelter for that matter are not doctors like you are not or I am not, but they have the requisite qualifications to take care of our babies.
No, Minister, she is aware, I presume, that at this present moment there's an expression of interest issued by her ministry for private sector shelters. And in that expression of interest, where the child has a medical condition, this is part 3, it says here that the shelter should have a medical practitioner, a specialized nursing officer, and that the caregivers should have, section 4 here, caregivers should be aged 25 and over, have a school certificate, and have a diploma in nursing. These are for children in the private sector who have medical conditions. You have yourself admitted that this child had a medical condition. This is my question. And now you tell me that CPE is okay. It's not according to your own terms of reference. That's what I'm saying.
Mr. Speaker, sir, we have to understand, and the House needs to take note, that the L'Oiseau du Paradis at Cap Malheureux is not a shelter. It is a relay center where we welcome children temporarily before placing them in other adequate institutions where they are going to be taken care of, whether they are placed back to home, whether they are placed in foster families, or they are taken care of in other residential care institutions, is a matter of a case-to-case basis as and when they come to our relay center, Mr. Speaker, sir.
The Minister will know that children stay in this relay center for months and months. I don't need to quote the figures for that. What's in the name? I'm not worried about the name, whether it is relay center or L'Oiseau du Paradis. This child, a vulnerable child, a weak child, a child who had a medical condition, has, against the advice of your own ministry for the private sector, been placed in an institution which had none of the medical facilities which were normally attached to institutions which can welcome such children. So I'm saying to you, and this is why I'm saying to you, it would be good to enlarge because to me, it seems unacceptable that the private sector has standards like this, and which nursing, etc., diploma, and the public sector has standards like this. And this is why we end up probably with issues that could have been avoided.
Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me to make this clear that when this baby was discharged by the hospital, at G2 hospital, the baby did not present any symptom. The baby was born with a congenital cardiovascular anomaly, but it was not a baby that was sick, and it was deemed fit to be discharged, Mr. Speaker, sir. That is when the baby was taken care of and was taken under the guard of the relay center at Cap Malheureux.
Very well, let's let that be, Mr. Speaker. I understand that only now the ministry has requested the Mauritius Institute of Education to run intensive courses for its staff beginning January. This is an admission, in fact, that all this time there were not adequate training for the staff. Not only are their academic qualifications far lower than might be acceptable for the private sector, but also it is only now, as from January, that they will be following a 10-week intensive course by the MIE at the request of your ministry. The question is, why only now? Why, after so many years, this is only now, after the Ombudsman has made the recommendation?
No, it is, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is not only after the Ombudsperson office had made the recommendation. This has been a document, this has been a process that we have, my ministry has been working very hard on implementing for quite a long time. And we should note that at present, there are no shelters that have the specialized personnel that the Leader of Opposition has mentioned. The standards are very high, but to be able to adhere to those standards, the adequate training exactly have to be provided. So the provisions for those are being made and will be met.
Can I ask the Honourable Minister for a guarantee that the standards in the public sector will be not an iota lower than the standards in the private sector? So we expect, in fact, the same standards to apply whether you're a poor child in a public sector institution or whether you're in a private sector institution. This is the minimum commitment I think that the Minister should make.
Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me to reassure this House and the population that when it comes to the welfare of our children, there is no standard high enough. There is always room for higher and better standards. Thank you.
Just one or two more questions, and I will give way, Mr. Speaker. One question is, the Ombudsman has said it, the fact-finding committee of 2015, the Valiant fact-finding committee said it, that it is, and the United Nations said that it is undesirable, unacceptable even probably, that young babies like that are placed in shelters where there are up to 50 or more other children, that this should not happen, and every effort should be made to put these children in foster care. Now, right after coming out of hospital, being born, where have you reached with placing children in foster care, and why weren't such young babies placed in foster care, as is recommended since 2015?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to inform the House that one of the children of the same mother is currently in foster care, and a request placed by my ministry, and a request had been made to the same family to be able to cater for the needs of this baby, the one that we are currently talking about, to join her sibling in the same family. But the foster care family was not ready at present to welcome the child. As to what is happening with our efforts in advancing and improving the foster care, we're professionalizing this department, Mr. Speaker, sir, and one recent measure is the increase in stipend provided to foster care parents, which I'm very grateful that my colleague, the Honourable Minister of Finance, agreed to and is already in place.
I have one last question and then maybe a final question if there's time. The adoption bill. Now, we've heard that the adoption bill is on the cards. This should be obviously, it's not a perfect solution, but it's a part solution to the issues of abandoned children and such that we have seen. Where are we with the abandoned children and with the adoption bill, and when are we going to have it in this House?
Mr. Speaker, sir, the adoption bill is currently at the level of the State Law Office. The Cabinet has already approved for the drafting instructions to be conveyed, and the team at the level of the State Law Office is working on the finalization of that bill. There have been numerous back and forth with my ministry and the SLO. I have no doubt that I will be bringing this piece of legislation imminently to the House, and I'm very happy to see that the Honourable Leader of Opposition agrees that although it might not be the magic solution to our problem, it will streamline a lot of procedures when it comes to adoption of our children and somehow alleviate this burden when it comes to cases like these in our relay centres and our residential care institutions. And I'm hoping that when the bill does come to Parliament, which it will very shortly, you will have the same good sentiments during the debates.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président. La ministre est-elle au courant des gros manquements au shelter de Cap-Malheureux? Pas de stérilisateur de biberons pour stériliser les biberons, mais dans un bol en plastique. Caméra dans la salle de repos pour visionner les female caregivers qui dorment. Toilettes cassées, salle de bain souillée, problème d'hygiène. Tu n'es pas au courant même, tu continues à voyager, promener dans Dubaï.
Put your question.
Est-elle au courant de ces manquements?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I cannot comment on pieces of paper being flashed and waved around in this August Assembly, as is very often done by members of the opposition. I cannot judge the authenticity of what you're waving at, the honourable member is waving at me. I would really like it if you could table those pictures and the authenticity of which could be confirmed to me before I can say anything on the matter. Thank you.
Honorable Amir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Minister mentioned very clearly that this very unfortunate baby had three major issues. It was born preterm. It was the birth of a baby out of a mother who had extreme, enormous risks. Thirdly, the baby had congenital malformation. My question is, was your ministry comfortable that such a baby that has so much risk of post-term will be transferred to a shelter where there is no medical surveillance? Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, sir, this is the same opposition who has on numerous occasions criticized when we leave our babies in hospital for a lengthy amount of time. The baby was medically discharged and medically deemed fit to be discharged from a hospital and placed in a residential care institution. The decision does not rest with my ministry. That is a decision that is made by qualified medical personnel like yourself.
La ministre ne pense-t-elle pas qu'il serait souhaitable que le Fact-Finding Committee soit présidé par une personne indépendante et non le PS, qui pourrait être juge et partie quand le shelter tombe sous la juridiction du ministère?
Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee comprises of not only officials of my ministry, it comprises of officers from the police department, from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, the National Empowerment Foundation, and independent members of another board. So I can reassure the House that the responsibilities that will rest on the fact-finding committee will be carried out judiciously.
May I know from the Honourable Minister whether, according to the protocol, being given that this relay falls under government purview, whether there is any protocol requiring the assistance of a doctor, whether there is any doctor on call which can be called, and if there is such a case, why was the doctor not called on that night?
Mr. Speaker, sir, there are regular established doctors' visits that are carried out at the level of the relay center. There are established protocol with the Ministry of Health, where we have follow-up on all our residents, whether it is at the level of community health centers, area health centers, or to the hospital. This was deemed an emergency, and in emergency, you would have done the same thing and taken the baby to the hospital straight away, instead of waiting for the doctor to come to the shelter.
One last question, Mr. Speaker. The fact-finding committee, the Valiant Fact-Finding Committee of 2015, asked for an independent regulatory body to supervise all shelters, hopefully also publicly owned ministry shelters. Where are we with the setting up of this regulatory body?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I welcome this question from the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Most of the recommendations stipulated in le rapport Vélien have already been implemented when it comes to the residential care institution through the residential care institution regulations of 2022. I'm sorry, except the setting up of this authority, which is currently being worked on.
No question? Your question?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I come back to the question put by my colleague, Honorable Omia? In relation to established protocol, we are talking of a patient, of a child, of a baby who's at risk. How is it that this child was discharged, notwithstanding that there is no foster parent available? Why is it that there was no special ward in the hospital to ensure that these at-risk children are kept in hospital?
Again, Mr. Speaker, sir, let me make this very clear. Discharging a child, or anybody for the matter, is not the purview of my ministry or the responsibility of my ministry. This is done so by the personnel of the hospital. So I cannot answer your question, Honourable Member of the Opposition, as to why the child was deemed fit to be discharged from the hospital. But once the child is discharged, she was taken very good care of at my shelter. It is not my decision to discharge somebody.
Yeah, it's okay.
Oui, la ministre peut-elle informer la Chambre du time frame qui a été accordé à ce comité pour compléter l'enquête, s'il vous plaît?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I will happily table the terms of reference of the committee to the House because I don't have the details right now in front of me.
Can I also ask the Honourable Minister whether she will happily table the findings of the fact-finding committee and make it public, except, of course, for the medical conditions of the baby, which is confidential?
Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me first to take cognizance of the findings of this committee before deciding whether it is appropriate to be tabled or made public. Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me to just add one very important thing. We should not over here miss the aim of the situation at hand. And this is a case of a very unfortunate baby who is seriously ill. And I have answered and I have put forward all the very good reasons why this baby finds herself in this situation today. And here we are talking about the preventive measures that has been taken by this government. We're talking about the bill that is going to be presented later on in first reading by my honourable colleague, the Minister of Health, Dangerous Drugs Amendment Bill. We're looking at the source of the problem, where a mother had been injecting herself with hard drugs. And eventually, it is important to see the context in which this baby is here today. It is very important to realize that. And I would urge not just the members of the opposition, anybody who is finding it correct to do so, to stop using this as a platform for any kind of gain, any political gain, because c'est malheureux. C'est malheureux.
I'm a little bit surprised at what the Honourable Minister said, as if it is the baby's fault.
No, I never said that.
That the mother...
I never said
Let
that,
me
Mr.
finish.
Speaker, sir.
I'm giving it a chance to clear this up also. You should not give the impression that it is the baby's fault that it is there. Therefore, it is now in your care. Whether the mother was this or that, that is not the concern of the baby. The baby must be given 1,000% support to survive and to thrive and to live a good life. So I regret the fact that the Honourable Minister has brought the status of the mother in a PNQ dealing with the baby.
Mr. Speaker, sir, there was no question, but I will indulge the Leader of the Opposition. It is not a question of blaming the child or the mother. It is actually putting all the facts to the House and to the population as how we have ended up with a critically ill baby today. So I think the Leader of the Opposition should actually salute the work of this government in its relentless combat against drugs, so we don't have such illicit substances being consumed by expected mothers in our country. This is why I have laid the facts to the House, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Time over.
Motion.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I move that all the business on today's order paper be exempted from the provisions of paragraph 2 of Standing Order 10.
The question is
Seconded.
that the business on today's order paper be exempted from the provisions of paragraph 2 of Standing Order 10. Those who say aye, those against say no. The ayes have it.
Statement by Ministers none. Public Bill, first reading.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I move that the Dangerous Drugs Amendment Bill number 15 of 2022 be read a first time.
Seconded.
Public Bill, second reading.
Resumption of debate. Honorable Dalia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for allowing me to take the floor to debate on this vital piece of legislation, that is the Mauritius Food Standards Agency bill in this August Assembly. Monsieur le Président, ce projet de loi, nous ne pouvons le nier, constitue un outil indispensable dans un pays comme le nôtre, où on veut que notre population ait l'occasion de consommer ce qui est bon, ce qui est sain, ce qui est propre. Ce projet de loi est aussi une indication additionnelle que la santé et le bien-être de tous les citoyens de notre République est une des priorités de ce gouvernement. Notre Premier ministre, l'honorable Pravin Kumar Jagnnath, n'a cessé de le répéter et son implication personnelle dans diverses activités visant à promouvoir le bien-être et la santé en sont la preuve. L'introduction du Mauritius Food Standards Agency Bill, Monsieur le Président, est la suite logique du Food Bill présenté récemment et qui a été voté déjà. Donc, avec le Food Bill déjà là, il faut maintenant un cadre légal approprié à travers une agence digne de ce nom pour permettre son implémentation dans le but de servir le public comme il se doit. C'est justement ce que l'honorable ministre de la Santé et du Bien-être s'est évertué à faire avec ses proches collaborateurs. Monsieur le Président, d'ailleurs, à la lecture de chaque point avancé dans le projet de loi sur lequel nous avons la tâche de débattre aujourd'hui, il est clair que l'honorable ministre de la Santé et du Bien-être a abattu un véritable travail d'orfèvre. Les efforts prouvent que ce gouvernement a la volonté de s'assurer que la population soit bien servie et respectée à sa juste valeur par les fournisseurs et autres opérateurs directement ou indirectement engagés dans la préparation de tout ce qui touche à la nourriture, à notre alimentation. Lorsqu'on parle d'alimentation, Monsieur le Président, c'est vraiment sérieux. La bonne nourriture a toute son importance pour notre santé, pour notre survie même. Dans le cas des enfants, leur croissance et leur épanouissement passent incontestablement par la consommation d'une bonne nourriture. Monsieur le Président, on ne peut gagner la confiance des consommateurs sans mettre en avant la qualité d'abord. Ce projet de loi vient justement responsabiliser à la fois les consommateurs, les fournisseurs et les opérateurs. Ce texte, qui confirme la volonté de notre gouvernement de s'assurer du bien-être de la population, est le meilleur moyen pour nous de nous assurer que nous consommons ce qui est bon et qui nous évitera des ennuis de santé liés à l'alimentation. Mr. Speaker, sir, when we talk about food consumption, there is no place for an ounce of compromise. In recent past years, there have been extensive publication of reports on dangers of artificial food dyes. I would take some of the time given to me to make an exposure on the dangers of artificial coloring. Over decades, there has been a steady increase in the use of synthetic dye used in food. Mr. Speaker, sir, the use of artificial coloring is widely used in many common food products, some of which are breakfast cereals, candies, snacks, desserts, pickles, salad dressings, tomato paste, soya sauce, oyster sauce, and monosodium glutamate, popularly known as Ajinomoto. Since the common people have very little or no experience in medical science, they may not be conscious of the harm that some foodstuff can cause. Ces additifs, si attractifs, mais aussi dangereux pour la santé, ne doivent pas se retrouver dans nos assiettes. Ces food dyes, œuvres dangereux de l'homme, sont des produits chimiques connus comme des silent killers. Je parle sous la correction des experts en sciences médicales. On sait que les principales causes du cancer, une des principales causes des décès à travers le monde, sont des produits que nous consommons. Les cancer-causing and toxic contaminants sont communs et Dieu sait le tort qu'ils font aux familles. Monsieur le Président, ce projet de loi fait provision pour que le public soit mieux informé des contenus exacts des produits alimentaires. Ce projet de loi vise la transparence et se veut être un outil pour la promotion du commerce alimentaire tout en s'assurant que la sécurité du public au niveau de la santé et la protection du consommateur ne soient pas des vains mots. Voilà un projet de loi qui vient se poser comme un rempart contre la mauvaise alimentation, Monsieur le Président. Que ce soit lorsqu'on parle de ce que nous produisons, de ce que nous importons ou de ce que nous exportons. J'ose croire qu'il y aura toute une vaste campagne de communication et d'éducation qui sera enclenchée par le ministère de la Santé et du Bien-être pour faire comprendre à la population que la bonne alimentation est devenue obligatoire. L'incidence de la bonne alimentation sur l'économie est facilement explicable. Une bonne alimentation permet de vivre bien, d'éviter des dépenses au niveau des soins médicaux et d'être plus productif. Mr. Speaker, sir, I turn briefly to the main provisions of the bill which set out guiding principles on the way the agency would work. First and foremost is that the essential aim of the agency is the protection of public health in relation to food. The explanatory memorandum of the bill sets out this main objective very clearly. It will carry out all of its functions with this overriding objective in mind, free from any conflict of interest. Mr. Speaker, sir, the agency will work in an area where sound science is absolutely essential and where new developments are brought all the time. The bill gives the agency the general function of keeping abreast of the latest scientific and technological understanding and of any other developments relevant to its work. We expect the agency to take a strong lead in developing a sound scientific base for food safety. It will also work closely with other departments and research funders to help coordinate food safety research and ensure that available resources are used effectively. Mr. Speaker, sir, part of the responsibility for keeping track of scientific developments will be the agency's ongoing monitoring of the safety of the food supply. The bill provides the agency with powers to carry out observations at any stage in the food chain, enabling it to monitor the general safety of the food supply, identify and track any problems, and inform good decision-making. The agency will normally seek to work with the full cooperation of the industry in carrying out that function. Since food safety is clearly in the interests of business as well as of consumers. The bill will provide powers of entry to be used if necessary to obtain information needed for public health reasons. Mr. Speaker, sir, the bill gives the agency a new function of monitoring food law enforcement. I should like to make it absolutely clear that contrary to the claims of some commentators, there are no plans to transfer general food law enforcement from local authorities to the agency. The government believes that there are considerable benefits to the current system of local enforcement of food laws, and the agency will build on that approach. We are concerned about consistency and effectiveness. The agency will therefore be able to set standards for and audit enforcement by local authorities working in partnership with local government to raise standards in that area. Mr. Speaker, sir, although the bill gives significant independence to the agency, it also makes clear that it must act responsibly. The bill contains provisions which will ensure that the agency acts reasonably and proportionately and is duly accountable through ministers to Parliament. Clause 5, paragraph 1, provides for a statement to be drawn up of the agency's objectives and practices. Mr. Speaker, sir, Clause 5, paragraph 3, subsection 1, provides for the new entity to make regulations to establish a statutory notification scheme for foodborne diseases. It is a valuable way of improving the quality of information about the prevalence and incidence of different types of foodborne diseases, which will help the agency and other bodies concerned with public health to tackle food poisoning problems. Mr. Speaker, sir, one of the many detrimental factors of the ongoing pandemic is the rise of food fraud. Food fraud, a term coined by two American academics from the Michigan University in 2011. It is defined as when food or drink is sold in a way that deliberately misleads or deceives consumers or customers for financial gain. Such examples are incorrect ingredients labeled on food packaging items, substitution of the goods, and unapproved enhancements, amongst others. Mr. Speaker, sir, with growing financial pressures, there may be little monitoring, and the increase of supply chain disruptions across the world. It is a temptation for some businesses to tamper with foods and ingredients in order to keep up with the panic buying of consumers. To give an example, the European Union's Anti-Fraud Office, also known as the OLAF, the Law Enforcement Agency, also known as Europol, and the International Criminal Police Organization undertake an annual operation called Operation Opson, whereby counterfeit and substandard food and beverage are taken off the market. The operation takes place in 72 member states combined, and from December 2020 to June 2021, around 15,000 tons of food and beverages with a value of about 53.8 million euros were seized. The International Criminal Police Organization, commonly known as Interpol's Secretary General Jürgen Stock, commented that Operation Opson demonstrates the massive profits food crime can generate and which can then fund other organized crime activities. Mr. Speaker, sir, illicit trade with food and beverages not only poses a real health risk to Mauritian consumers, but also harms the economic interests of our country. This bill provides a platform where such kind of issues can be discussed and frameworks can be implemented and followed up to ensure a higher degree of consumer safety, a greater transparency in food industry supply chain, as well as holding the relevant industries accountable to their wrongdoings when needed. To conclude, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have already made good progress towards implementing the provisions of the food bill. This bill will make it possible for the agency to operate as a separate legal entity. It is the government's aim, subject to the successful passage of the bill, that the agency formally starts its work. Mr. Speaker, sir, the bill will provide the basis for a unique new body, authoritative, independent, open and responsive to the concerns of consumers. It will build firm foundations for a new era of competence in our food sector, from which we will all benefit, consumers and the food industry alike. On these lines, I therefore fully support all the provisions of this bill. Long live the Republic of Mauritius. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Mr. Speaker, the Mauritius Food Standards Agency Bill is a bill of major significance and is a logical follow-up to the Food Act. The bill has shortcomings, but is non-controversial. Therefore, I don't intend to pick a quarrel with the minister over a comb or hairbrush. It will be an awakening call. Let me come to the explanatory memorandum, which whets our appetite with well-defined purpose. However, implementation remains key to the provisions of the bill. The resources available to assess quality of processed and non-processed foods. There is no shortage of physical and human resources, and we need to ask the question, why is it then that we fall short of standards? These shortcomings will be identified. Mr. Speaker, the country is a maze of poor utilization, unutilization, and duplication of resources. The minister has to inform the House if a dedicated team will be set up shortly after the bill is passed to prepare the regulations. The Mauritius Food Standards Agency cannot be a one-size-fits-all. The regulation should be carved out to cater for different categories of operators. As a net feed food importing country, exporter of agro-related products, and a service-oriented economy, we need to level up to meet demands of consumers. The essence, as spelled out in the bill, is safety and nutritional quality of food. Expectations are indeed very high, and there should be no faulty line on norms and standards. That is, no let go of safeguards to public health and consumer protection as highlighted in the bill. The minister has unfettered powers which give him the freedom to expedite matters. However, the freedom should not be a license for arbitrariness. Mr. Speaker, did the minister really have an in-depth discussion with the stakeholders at the bar of public opinion? So he said. I'm not saying that I don't subscribe to what he has been said, but I invite him to lay on the table of the National Assembly, without fear or prejudice, the salient features of the findings of the outcome of the meeting. The information relayed to me from reliable sources say the meeting had no scale, no scope, and no depth. But then, one swallow, Mr. Speaker, does not make a spring. I will turn now to specific cases. The protest staged by the owner of Akaroti on 20th of this month before Parliament raised legitimate questions over the unfair application of the letter of the law. I'm glad that there's been a positive outcome following the intervention of Honorable David, prominent member of constituency number 1. The support of Honorable Juman did not go unnoticed. Of course, there should be no departure from basic established norms and standards. I grant you the Minister of Health acted as facilitator, and I hope this spirit will prevail as there are several cases which have to be addressed. Food handlers operating at Le Réduit, whose certificate and work permits are in order, are being chased like wildcats without any alternative site being proposed. Why? I've been told that it's due to the extension of the rail track. But they've been there since more than 10 years. I met them in the presence of Mr. Dial, and they cannot be treated shoddily. Vegetable sellers, victualers of meat and fish shops at Cattlebone Market Fair are flummoxed because of the uncertainty and the unpredictability of the regime. What will happen to the market fair, which has cost taxpayers more than 20 million rupees? It was constructed only a few years ago. Will the operators be relocated? But the operators, vegetable sellers or victualers, they have rights, and the regime cannot run away from its obligation. Since operators cannot depart from health safety regulation, the agency will have to be fully involved in the decision-making process. The representative of the local government on the board has to voice out. To meet food standards, the agency has to see to it that irrespective of temporary location, the infrastructural setup has to be appropriate. As we say, Mr. Speaker, it takes two to tango. My colleagues on the opposition bench have urged note of caution. Unlike the regime, the bill may not be controversial, but is repleted with the word may. Therefore, it may open the door for abusive practices. The agency has to be equipped, and acquisition will be made, but the question that begs an answer, will there be accountability and transparency in contract allocation? Professionalism and integrity cannot stay in the cloud or sink to oblivion. I hope lessons have been drawn and learned. The Director of Audit drew our attention in his report of a controversial allocation of tenders of more than 1 billion for emergency procurement. Bad habits breed contempt with a regime whose days in office may be numbered. This is a regime of kickback waited to be kicked out. Mr. Speaker, let me come to the thrust of the bill. Like the Food Act, the objects of the Mauritius Food Standard Agency will not be met immediately despite the agency's best endeavor. I vividly recall the aggressiveness and zeal with which his predecessors under the Labour-led government acted. Health and quality of life matters indeed. It was a crusade against those who acted against the provision of the Food Act. And we must not lose sight that our yearly export of agro-related products total 23.6 billion. Why our tuna, our sugar, especially our special sugars, our cane juice, rum, pineapple, sought after? Norms, standards, and quality control matter. Constant leveling up to keep our brand name should be our mantra. Agro-Maurice then cannot rest upon its laurels because competitiveness is the norm. There was a time when we even exported organic sugar. And I've been told that there's a big craze for jackfruit in UK amongst the vegans. Therefore, the Mauritius Food Standards Agency has to deliver. A roadmap has to be established with clearly defined policies. The Minister of Health is right to lay emphasis on the relevance of the Codex Alimentarius of FAO. The bill is being moved when a sizable number of persons hardly have food adequate food on the plate to move the bowels. This is a daily occurrence in our ocean state. And I'm sure many of us have a story to tell of the number of persons coming to us in the car park of supermarkets, like Oliver Twist asking money to buy food. How many stomachs are held hostage by the cost of living crisis? Against the consequences of war in Ukraine, the lingering effect of COVID, mismanagement of our economy by a hard-up regime to rein in inflation, a surge in food bills has been inevitable. The immediate concern of the mere mortal is not quality food, food of nutritional value, or food with safety standards. The worry is whether the family can afford a meal a day. Informed choices, indeed, but unlike the war chest or money bag of the MSM, the purse of the individual does not stretch to buy food of one's choice. The fit-for market of agri-produce from farm to fork, financed by the European Union and the ACP under COLE-ACP program, set the standards. Since 2019, due to the increasing incidence of COVID cases, application of standards and norms are more rigorous. But as I said, low-quality produce are available due to the cost of living crisis. My good friend, the Minister of Civil Service, knows the relevance of certification and anti-dumping. Our Victorian pineapple is not sought after in the EU, sweet and juicy, but beware of artificial sweeteners. There is fierce competition from Kenya. Mauritius was taken to task over dumping and non-compliance to norms and standards. As of now, there is no certainty on import criteria of processed products, especially chicken from South Africa. The regulations are yet to be drafted, and conflicting views expressed by technicians from the vet services of the Ministry of Agro-Industry. The officers are not to be blamed. Since 2015, there has been no follow-up to prepare the regulations. Operators have to bear an additional cost. Importers feel aggrieved, and as members of SADC, an African Continental Free Trade Agreement, compliance to non-tariff barriers like sanitary phytosanitary standards should be binding. Yes, to level playing field and no departure from international and obligations. Mr. Speaker, I recall one exporter of pre-cooked samosa lost his niche market to European Union because of water dripping from ceiling. Let me come to some foodborne diseases. Who hasn't heard of the story of Mary the cook, who had to quit her job because she was a carrier of hepatitis, which is easily transmitted to customers? Herding of live animals in feedlots or pens, carriers of ship cargo, may give rise to salmonella, foot and mouth diseases, and typhoid. You recall the number of cattle which was slaughtered because of mad cow disease. The avian flu in China led to the elimination of all poultry farms in Hong Kong and China. A recent bird flu outbreak has led to restriction in specific areas in UK. Keepers of live animals have to follow strict sanitary conditions. Mr. Speaker, our quality of life rests on the diligence and honesty of the health inspectors. Confidence will grow as long as cases secondary to foodborne diseases are constantly on the decrease. There was a time when agricultural services used to publish pesticide residue level in vegetables on a fortnightly basis. And we know that these pesticide residues are carcinogenic. Certain vegetables are best eaten frozen, and locally grown squash and good veggies better be avoided. Speaker, don't spare the multinational food chain simply because of brand name. Superheated cooking oil is being used over and over and harmful to the health. Level Up starts with a host of accompanying measures. Hand-holding the food handlers first, and advise a rapid reach out for a better outreach. Street food should be of quality. It's not a treat for all of us. It's a treat, in fact, for all of us, mainly for tourists, and we should see to it that they don't beg to differ. Who does not enjoy a walk to the central market but what has been done since 2015 to upgrade health and sanitary facilities. And if you want to be greeted by the biggest green flies carriers of foodborne diseases, go to the food, to the fish and meat sections of the central market. Mr. Speaker, let me come to the agents. One-stop shop and should operate under one roof. If the will is there to address the issue of food standards in a meaningful and effective manner, the battle is therefore not arduous. Manpower training, dissemination of information, and physical resources are strong links in the conveyor belt. The awarding bodies have the reputation to keep, and I must say, the Mauritius Standards Bureau used to deliver. It is a mandatory bureau. I have to pay tribute to its former director, Mrs. Nanak, who left a good legacy to her politically appointed manager. And we are told that the general manager of Mauritius Standards Bureau is acting like KGB and has put her staff under strict monitoring and surveillance. There is no direction, given that this is a highly technical bureau. The bureau has 9 laboratories, but find out what has happened to the micro laboratory lab. It is inoperable. An example in 2020, Mr. Speaker, the then director made a request for a budget to buy a DNA equipment, polymerase DNA, for testing of basmati rice to control non-basmati sold on the market as basmati. And who will check if it's quality basmati, fake basmati, or no basmati at all. Equipment sent back after 2 years. And that was acquired more than 2 years ago. It has been of no use, purchased at an exorbitant price from one of the major companies, and this equipment has become almost obsolete. They could make good use of it, and then it had to be sent back. And in many areas, the MSB, Mr. Speaker, is moving backward, and it's sad for our country. Mr. Speaker, data to measure and analyze trends are relevant. I hope Food Agricultural Research Extension Institute and the Statistical Division of the MSRI and the MCIE are living up to the expectation of our producers. Where is the inter- and interinstitutional approach? Yet the international safety standards and nutritional quality of food relevant to improve consumer confidence in products and to incorporate greater control of risk for food safety, these are imperative. Let me now come to the recruitment. I pray that the Minister of Health understand the meaning of lessons drawn and learned. A director of the agency has to be chosen on the grounds of merit. The board has to be diligent. The director should be of the board, and the selected candidate should not be plucked by the minister from the back streets of the MSM. The transfer or appointment of employees, if carried out after consultation with the PSC or Local Government Service Commission, certainly would give some respite. It should not, and my fear that it's going to be jobs for the boys, but it should be jobs for the world, for the well-deserved. Mr. Speaker, the narrative, Minister, starts from farm, beyond farm gate to the fork. And as a net food, fuel, feed importing country, let us look at our food bill. It's a staggering 45 billion rupees, if not more. Government has a moral, legal responsibility to protect the health of the nation. The global food chain is compelling, and we have to hear the voices of those who occupy its upper and lower rungs. The law is an ass, and loophole has to be plugged to avoid potential injury being inflicted by multinational, supermarket, or any other stakeholder. By introducing this bill, the Department of Health and Welfare aims to convey proper information about the food distributed to our local market. And the question which needs to, rather begs an answer. Had the consumer been informed that the food system is fragile, because of the size of its ecological footprint. The Minister of Environment has not been reassuring despite his long diatribe. The cost of a green revolution is expensive with excessive use of chemicals or fertilizer. The escalating cost of fuel needed to drive tractors to prepare the land and water to irrigate the fields. If we factor in the cost of haulage and logistics to ferry produce from port to factories and vice versa, the cost is prohibitive. The revolution is meant to swell the pockets of multinational or big companies in the multi-billion agri-business. Let us give serious thought to what once was a reality. And I will come back to it, Mr. Speaker. Eat what we produce and produce what we eat is now a reality for many micro and small island developing states. Unfortunately, the regime has encroached upon massive prime agricultural land. Where is our topsoil for quality produce? Where is our smart agriculture and farm breeding policy? Our feedlots are cauldrons of blood, antibiotics, and massive grain. The chicken meat is too soft, and the venison from the feedlot is too tough. Mr. Speaker, let me conclude by calling upon the agency to fully grasp the relevance and importance of food safety standards. Is it the produce of free and fair trade? Can we have food or trade free of ethical, health, and environmental conditions? No, but I expect the Mauritius Food Standards Agency to be the watchdog. What will the Prime Minister say at COP27 to be held in Sharm el-Sheikh? The agency will have to fulfill its role and wage an aggressive campaign, as was stated very clearly by Honorable Dahlia, to sensitize the public at large, but also to sensitize the public on genetically modified organisms. Choices have led to the setting up of dedicated eco-friendly NGOs. I hope consumers won't be gagged and misled. Artificial intelligence should be applied for informed decision and to understand customer behavior. Mr. Speaker, the Minister has a plate full of expectation. The agency has to deliver and should not fall foul of set objectives. I ask the Minister to carve out and not to cave in to multinational. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for allowing me to bring my humble contribution to this debate. At the very outset, allow me to congratulate the Honorable Minister of Health and Wellness, Honorable Kailash Kumar Singh Jagatpal, for presenting a sensible bill to the House, a bill which is of concern to every citizen in this country. And it is under this regime and under the able leadership of the Honorable Prime Minister that such a bill is being presented. Let me reassure the respected former member who spoke right before me, on the other side of the House, that, as he mentioned, lessons drawn and learned. Yes, we've learned the lesson that excess of Kotomili Satini or Amul milk could be very bad for our digestive system. Mr. Speaker, sir, I have always been listening very carefully, and I have tried to understand whether we were referring to the same bill in this House, because we are here talking about the Mauritius Food Standards Agency bill. But during the debate, I could hear about the food handlers, the market of Quatre Bornes, and I was trying to find the essence where it is in this bill. And as he often says it, the proof of the pudding is very often in the eating. So I guess he did not digest this bold bill being presented in the House. Well, Mr. Speaker, sir, one might call it a coincidence, but I believe that it is a right opportunity for us to present such a bill to this House, because on the 16th of August, we celebrated the World Food Day. And the theme this year was better production, better nutrition, a better environment, and a better life. However, on the other hand, the World Bank Report 2022 clearly states that the COVID-19 pandemic triggered the largest global economic crisis seen in more than a century, with especially severe impacts for emerging economies. This sets the theme and the tone for reasonable debate for the Food Standards Agency Bill. One cannot dispute this, that for better production, better nutrition, and better environment, one undeniably needs a better policy and agency for regulation. The former member who spoke before me mentioned about some queries, and this is what I think we fail as member of the National Assembly to explain to the population who are following the debates. The explanatory memorandum give all explanations, give clear explanations to all your doubts, to all your queries that you've put forward in this House. The explanatory memorandum is very clear. It mentions clearly that it's there to ensure a high degree of consumer confidence in the safety and nutritional quality of food produced, processed, imported, solid in, or exported from Mauritius. You had queries about it. It's there in the explanatory memorandum. It also sets at F, it says developing standards and procedures for the certification of vegetarian food, halal food, and such other food as may be prescribed. So if one takes the time to read the bill, the explanatory memorandum in itself is very, very clear. Mr. Speaker, sir, COVID-19 has impeded progress and created setbacks, contributing to a slow and mixed picture of our economic system, whereby giving rise not only in Mauritius, but in the whole world, whether it's hunger, whether it's food security or malnutrition in all forms. Nevertheless, we also have to face the Ukraine war, disrupting the supply chain, affecting the global grain, fertilizer, and energy prices. Global food and energy prices are soaring and have reached levels not seen in decades. And this is not this regime. It is a world thing happening. The growing frequency and intensity of extreme climate events continue to be major disruptors of agricultural production and supply chains, affecting food security. The intensification of the major drivers behind recent food insecurity, malnutrition trends like conflict, climate extremes, and economic shocks have combined with high cost of nutritious foods and growing inequalities, which is actually challenging all the food security and nutrition. This will actually be the case until the agri-food systems are transformed and become more resilient. And this is what this regime is doing. Through this bill, the Mauritius Food Standards Agency Bill, the minister comes forward with a clear view about what's the role of the agency and what's going to be the role of this agency in terms of telling us what we are eating. And we always say it, we are what we eat, but do we really know what we eat? All of us sitting here, we are great fans of whether it's minbui, whether it's dal puri, whether it's a pudding, whether you go to the central market, like you've said, Honorable Member, you've been there, but this is what this bill is coming forward to. That is to regularize everything that we are eating. My honorable friend, Honorable Dahlia, mentioned about the preservatives, about everything that's causing harm to our health. So these are things which are on the wrong side, but this bill comes to really cater for all that we have been questioning ourselves. And all of us sitting here, we are parents, we are people, we are foodies, as we used to say it, we are people who consume. So this bill, in the very essence in itself, it comes forward with what requires for us as citizens, as consumers, to know exactly what's in our plate. Well, There is also numerous reports which came forward, and I think there is the report of the Minister of Health itself, which is the Mauritius Non-Communicable Disease Survey 2022, where the figures clearly state that 1/3 of the adult Mauritian population have hypertension, and a large proportion of them are not aware that they have this disease. How do we get hypertension? Because we consume a lot of fast food. Do we know actually what's there? We have products like soy sauce, whether it's good for our health, whether it's bad, how much amount is there. This is what this agency will give us all the details. And also there's the prevalence of diabetes. And let's talk about our children. There are some worldwide reports which comes forward saying that there's an increasing number of obesity in our children because we are always consuming fast food. So now this agency will come to correct all these inequalities, all these irregularities about our family. Mr. Speaker, sir, the FAO came forward with a report, and in its recommendation, it mentioned that a key recommendation is that governments start rethinking how they can reallocate their existing public budget to make them more cost-effective and efficient in reducing the cost of nutritious foods and increasing the availability and affordability of healthy diets from sustainable agri-food system and leaving no one behind. This is what this government is doing. We are setting ourselves, we are aligning ourselves to international standards. I would like to stick to the essence of the very bill itself. The function of the agency, as it's mentioned in section 5, clearly mentions, subsection 1, that it shall be the duty of the agency to provide advice, technical support, and recommendations to the minister on standards and regulations under the Food Act 2022. Another very important element under section 5, subsection 3, is the conduct food hazard monitoring surveys, foodborne disease surveys, and audits for purpose of implementing performance measures to test the effectiveness of the food control, which I think is really laudable. Mr. Speaker, sir, another element which is of high importance in this bill is section 5, that is the functions of the agency, where it mentions that the role is to develop the food standards, having regard to relevant international standards and recommending maximum limits for food additives, which we consume each and every day, microbiological counts, pesticides, residues, veterinary drugs, residues, heavy metals, processing aids. And I would also appreciate the effort of the Honourable Minister by proposing amendments at committee stage in regard to the clause 5, that is in subclause 3, by deleting paragraph K and stating develop procedures under which risk shall be assessed, analysed, communicated, and managed by using developed protocols where available. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to conclude on the note that as a mother of 2 children, I fully support this bill because I think it's absolutely important for us as consumers to know exactly what's in our plate, and I certainly support this bill. But I, however, want to set it on record that I condemn members on the other side who had the opportunity to do politique autrement by sticking to the bill itself, by supporting the bill, which is of concern for each and every citizen of Mauritius. But yet another missed opportunity from the members of the opposition to show their good faith. I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Members at this stage, just suspend the sitting for 30 minutes.